Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's SANS webcast, Being Offensive in the Workplace. My name is Carol Auth of the SANS Institute, and I will be moderating today's webcast. Today's featured speaker is Derek Rook. If during the webcast you have any questions for our presenter, please enter them into the questions window located on the GoToWebinar interface at any time. Please note that this webcast is being recorded, and a copy of the slides and recording of this webcast will be available for viewing later today and can be found on the SANS registration page. And with that, I'd like to hand the webcast over to Derek.
Thanks, Carol. So hi, everybody. I'm Derek Rook, and welcome to my talk about being offensive in the workplace. Just to recap what Carol said, if you have any questions for us, just go ahead and enter them into the questions area there, and we'll see them and address them as we go. One last thing before we get started, I'm sure all of you are familiar with this kind of disclaimer, but as much as my place of employment is enthusiastic and supportive of the stuff that I do, they don't necessarily want to be mentioned in this. So these are all my own personal observations and experiences that I've kind of gathered as I've gone through my career. So a little bit about me. I have several SANS certifications. As mentioned in the kind of pre-show, I live stream hacking challenges from various websites like VulnHub and Hack the Box. In my off time, when I'm not at the office or live streaming stuff, I donate my time to a costuming organization called 501st, which does charitable events like charity walks, and we do a lot of work with Make-A-Wish. And then I also practice a martial art called Kendo, which is Japanese swordsmanship. So that's a little bit about me. Let's talk about what we're trying to do here in this talk, or what we're trying to get out of this talk. So a couple years ago, I was in a panel at one of the SANS Hackfest conferences, and we were going back and forth. The panelists and I were going back and forth about all these cool offensive things we can do to improve our security posture. And somebody asks us a question. He's like, that's great. I'm the only security person. How can I implement this stuff, all this cool stuff you're talking about? And I didn't really have a good answer. So I thought about it and came up with this talk. So the first goal of this talk is really kind of maximize the value you get from conferences like DEF CON or the SANS Hackfest Summit. Really things where you go and you get super excited about all of this cool stuff, but you don't feel that you necessarily have the resources at the office to carry these out. So along with that, we're going to try and grow our offensive capabilities a little bit more. When I was I'm mostly red team focused now, but when I was in blue team, I really wanted to get more into the offensive side, and not having an offensive team and not having, really a whole lot of backing to do stuff like that, I tried to think of little ways that I could start injecting offensive engagements and activities into my normal work stream that would allow me to learn and get some experience and get a better understanding of how all this stuff works. And as we all know, the more offensive practice we get and the more offensive exposure we get, the better we understand our defensive posture, the better we understand, where our weak areas are and where we need to shore up our defenses. And then finally, we just want to have more fun in the office, right? And we'll get into some activities that I identified, that I kind of took some of my colleagues through. But really, it's just about generating an enthusiasm about security across the office that gets more support for you doing this kind of fun stuff that you want to do. And so the first thing we got to do is we got to get buy-in from our peers. We have to, we really, if no one in the office, if no one in our organization enjoys or actively thinks about engaging you about security stuff, the level of effort you have to put out to advance security agendas is much higher, right? We have to seek people out rather than people come to us. We have to, follow up with them rather than them following up with us. So let's get some buy-in from our peers. The first way I thought to do this is I wanted to incorporate an offensive demo into one of our security awareness talks. So we had, twice a year security awareness presentations, and back then they were pretty much the standard affair of, dry phishing training of don't click this stuff, if somebody doesn't badge into the door, stop them, kind of stuff. And I just, I didn't want to see people falling asleep in our security awareness demos, or security awareness talks. So I was thinking about cool stuff that we could do. And one of the things that I wanted to do, since I was trying to learn more offensive stuff, is I was like, well, why don't we do a demo? And I thought about how we would want to do this demo, what the best way to raise engagement would be. So when you do something like this, you want to be flashy, right? You have, security awareness talks are usually an hour, maybe 30 minutes, but you have to go super fast because you also have all of that compliance and regulatory stuff you have to go through. So you want to be flashy, do crazy stuff that, is normally gimmicky, right? Turn on the webcam, maybe do some password cracking. Uh, when I did the security demo, I made a super short word list for John the Ripper. And in that word list were things like spring 2018 and name of company, 2017. And, basically a small word list of stuff that we all know are very common passwords. And when I ran this password cracking thing and it cracked, the 8 demo passwords that I made for this, you kind of look out over the crowd and see some eyes go wide as they recognize their passwords on the screen. And so you get two things. You get people excited about security, and you show them, and that's the great thing about offensive security, is you show them how this stuff works, how easy it is for us to carry out some of these attacks. And they actually understand that maybe spring 2018 isn't such a great password, not because we told them it wasn't great, but because they saw it on the screen after 10 seconds of cracking, right? So another cool thing I did, I gave a talk at a local brewery. I do some security awareness presentations, in the community. And so during a similar kind of demo, I ran a search on the target box for taxreturn.pdf. And then of course you see a bunch of eyes go wide. So really just showing the impact and the ease of these attacks is quick wins to kind of get people more interested in what's going on rather than just preaching at them, hey, security is important, right? We show them kind of the cool stuff that we can do. And really, you just want to show your passion. You want to get excited about this stuff. You want to show how cool it is. I mean, as security people, whether you're offensive or defensive, we're basically spies, right? We're professional spies. We get paid to do this cool, crazy stuff that they only see on like CSI Cyber. And I know it's not, one-to-one correlation, but, this is fancy stuff. And somehow people think it's boring. So if we show the passion that we have, we can really start getting them engaged. And what's also important, the last thing that's important, is you can't get too technical during these talks. The screenshot here shows Meterpreter, and I know that, Meterpreter, some people think it's a crutch and some people don't like to use it or whatever, but it's perfect for these kinds of demos because you can run one command and get the webcam streaming up there. And that's maximum impact, right? Without getting technical, without getting people tuning out during your talk. Because the last thing you want people doing is kind of, nodding off while you're doing the exciting part of your security awareness talk. So with this talk, the next thing I did is basically immediately after the security awareness. So to entice people to stay to the end of the security awareness demo, I said, hey, let's have a Lockpick Village afterwards. And this is actually a shot. This is one of the few shots I have from this company that I used to work at, and the offensive stuff we did. But I got funding for a Lockpick Village I wanted to be able to host maybe like 15 people picking at the same time, and I spent $150 total. And some places you can get $150 funding, no problem. Other places you don't. If you have that size, just cut that in half. If you have to fund it yourself, the gains you get at work are so worth it. So when you do this stuff, you want that kind of oh my moment. These people have never done anything, probably never done anything security related in their life, almost definitely never done anything offensive related, right? And so when the first time they pop one of those clear locks that we all like roll our eyes at of like, why do people even buy those? The first time they pop one of those locks, they immediately get security. They immediately understand. And so there's a story Matter of fact, one of the guys in this picture, he's kind of in the back, told me, he said, when the first time I popped the lock, my entire perspective shifted because I used to look at a locked door as a wall, and now I look at it as a level of effort. And if you think about the way security professionals look at security, we never look at things as secure or not secure. We look at things as uh, shades of gray. We look at them as levels of effort, levels of risk, etc. So getting non-security people to think that same way is so important. And this is oh no, my headset died. So this is a tactile way to get them to understand that level of security. So the next thing you want to do, I mean, the next thing it does, it gets people excited. They're like, heck yes, I'm going to learn how to pick locks today. And how many days of the week can people, say that's going to happen? It's a unique thing. For us, it wasn't unique. It was I think we did it about quarterly once I started running it. So that was they get excited. They look forward to it. They look forward to engaging with you. This is a time where you can hang out with the people that you don't necessarily normally hang out with, doing a security related focused thing that's fun, and they get used to talking to you. They get used to approaching you with security stuff. And immediately after our first Lockpick Village, I had our lawyer, one of our chief counsels from the company, say, "Hey, can I talk to you for 15 minutes?" And of course, I was worried because I didn't know what what he wanted to talk about. But he ended up wanting to talk to me about his security posture outside of the office, the things that he does in his everyday life, how to secure his phone, if the things he's doing with his bank account are good or not, the way he's approaching, his online identity. And that 15 minutes turned into an hour and a half talk, and it was one of the best hours and a half that I spent at that office because it greatly increased his outside of the office security. And as we're mostly aware, outside of the office security really matters to our office security as well, because if somebody gets owned outside of the office, then they're just one pivot away from getting into the office, right? Another fun story about the Lockpick Village is maybe a month or two later, our office manager walks up to us and she's like, "Hey, I wanted to tell you, I got this requisition form for this locked cabinet that we were going to store hardware prototypes in." And I told them, heck no, because I think I could pick that lock. And I high-fived her. It was one of the best things because now she was not even a technical person. She was our office manager. She was super smart and an awesome person, but she doesn't really think about computers much. And if we can have her thinking about security instinctively from an instinctive point of view, that's exactly the kind of stuff we want. And lastly, we want to start recruiting, and we'll get into what we're going to recruit for in a little bit, but just kind of keep that in mind. You're going to kind of keep your eyes on the people that really enjoyed it or really enthusiastic about it, were really good at picking locks and stuff. Kind of, those are your entry points into the various teams to start interacting with them more. So once you have buy-in from your peers, once your engagement's up a little bit, you want to go to your boss. And you want to approach your boss for some more expanded capabilities and opportunities, right? But if you come to your boss, you best come correct. All right, you can't come to your boss with a half-baked idea. You have to really have specific goals in mind. What do you want to do? Do you want 10 or 20% of your time to be offensive? Maybe it's less. Maybe you don't want to do a lot of offensive work. Maybe you just want more funding or support for these these activities like the Lockpick Villages, or maybe funding escape rooms for different teams or stuff like this. Maybe that's what you want, but you have to have a goal in mind. Additionally, you want to bring some measurable facts. You want to talk about how much engagement has been raised, how much more people are approaching you for help, or maybe it's a raise of awareness in phishing. Maybe more people are reporting possible phishing attacks. But measurable facts helps your goal, helps your boss understand what the benefit of this stuff is. And then have a plan. right? You have a couple small ideas first. You're like, look, we'll start with this, and we'll kind of move up from there as we show success, and as we demonstrate value. And on that note, you have to demonstrate value. No one, your business is still a business, and as much as they want you to grow and succeed and have fun and stay with the company, they're not going to do anything unless it makes some sort of business sense for them, whether it's direct monetary value or an increase in security posture or work life improvement or whatever that is. You have to demonstrate value and demonstrate that in terms that they consider valuable. So let's talk a little bit about this, start small and grow scope. So it's time to execute. So the first thing you want to do, or kind of not necessarily a specific activity, but kind of how you approach this, right, is that you want to build out operational maturity. You can't launch an APT style organization within your company if you don't have even basic, monitoring and patching programs or vulnerability management or, incident response or anything like that. So the first thing you want to do is identify some gaps. And then you want to highlight the areas that how you can improve and fill those gaps, right? And I think one of the best things about offensive security, and one of the things I love about offensive security, is that getting people to care about security, care about the what if, is very difficult, because the answer is always comes back with, well, it's your job to prevent that what if. Well, if you have an offensive group, or you have someone who's offensively minded and has some capabilities to demonstrate, like, no, here's how easy it is. Let me demonstrate this for you. Let me show you this happening. Here's how easy it is. Here's the impact, right? Demonstrate that impact. It helps sell that a lot more. So then once you demonstrate how bad it can get, one of the things that I like to say in my talks is, never come with all negatives, right? Don't come with just the end of the world story. You have to help remediate. You have to give them ways out, or else they're just going to hear that the world's ending and that you're just, being um, defeatist, or you're just coming to them with Chicken Little, which is what they perceive all security people as, right? They're like, oh, of course you think everything's insecure and the world's going to end. That's just you silly security people. So you have to come to them with solutions and help them remediate. And you do that by establishing your security programs, right? New initiatives, and help build those out. Until you get a full-time offensive group, or you transition to a full-time offensive gig, you still have to do some of the building. And in my current role, I run a purely offensive group. That's our mission statement. That's our mandate. But we even today still help build things and advise on ways to remediate and stuff like that. So pitch in and help fix the things that need fixing, so you can move on to the cooler stuff. So one of the cool things that you can move on to is phishing, right? And so most people already have some sort of phishing training. They already do, yearly phishing campaigns to see how many people clicked or whatever. But you can dial that up a notch, right? You can turn it up to 11 if you want. And so you can start creating your own payloads. You can, either create your own, start with an interpreter or some kind of shell. You can create your own malicious websites that, report back in certain ways. You start kind of getting into the weeds a little bit about how these phishing campaigns work and what the actual adversaries do, and then you can adapt that to something more constructive. So instead of installing a bunch of malware on the box and calling back to a C2, you can get some command to run on the box that says, hey, you were part of this phishing training, and here are ways that you can improve next time, or whatever, and actually build those payloads, non-malicious payloads for training purposes. But they use the same skills, and you can kind of learn how those work. The next thing you can do as your phishing training matures is you can start phishing alternative channels like Slack or hipchat, or I tell you what, the first time I phished a Jenkins server with some like build updates that had malicious links in them, the DevOps team was so mad and impressed. It was awesome. And so if you can build the rapport that I had talked about in the beginning of the talk, and get the maturity level up to where they can they don't feel super tricked by these crazy things, these crazy alternative tactics, then you can really start doing fun stuff like phishing alternative channels, even out of band channels like SMS. If you have only talk to your lawyers before you do any offensive stuff, but I would only phish SMS if you have company-owned phones, would be my recommendation. Hashtag I am not a lawyer. But the important thing I'm trying to get across here is level up with your organization. Don't start out, again, don't initiate state actor level attacks if you don't have an IR program. Don't start phishing Slack or hipchat if your organization is still clicking on the super basic phish. You have to train them up. You have to get them. I'm sorry, I need to plug this in. So you have to get them past the beginning to make it to get to the advanced stuff is the important thing. So if you think back to the Lockpick Village, and I said start recruiting, you want to start recruiting people so that you can start building your own amateur red team. And this is something that I did at a previous organization. I wanted a red team. I wanted to be on a red team, and we didn't have a red team. So I said, you know what, let's make one. And I recruited, I had a lawyer with me. I had a project manager. I had a couple DevOps people, a couple release engineering people. I had some graphic designers, and all of these people just took to lockpicking like fish in water. And I said, how would you guys like to be hackers, like part-time hackers? And so we started meeting every other week. And we started developing ideas about how we could break into the office, how we would do it, what important things could we achieve by doing it, what are some of the objectives that we'd want to do, right? So we decided one weekend, and we of course got permission to do all of this stuff, but we picked one weekend and we actually broke into the office. And I should have put this in quotes, but really what I did is I bought several of the same locks that our building has, and I put them all up in vices and had them pick through a series of locks that represented each door they would have to get through. We had to do this because we didn't actually own our buildings, and one of the cardinal rules of lockpicking is don't pick something you don't own. So we did that. We quote unquote broke into the office, and then once we got into the office, we started looking around for unlocked computers. We found several unlocked computers, and as we know, if a computer's unlocked, we can use that access to start access, get into other things. Additionally, we look for unlocked office doors, VP office doors, locked areas where we had hardware prototypes, etc. We found a few where unannounced, super sensitive prototypes were just laying around in unlocked offices that could have been walked off with by cleaning staff or anyone else who had managed to pick the 4 locks they needed to get in. So while we did that, we took notes, right? We made this official. We took notes, we documented everything, and then we generated a real report. We generated an official report. We had a logo, that was like a red version of our company's logo, because we're, clever like that. But we generated a real report, and we did a real readout with some of the security leadership and some of the business leadership as well. And we said, look, there's several places where cameras need to be. These doors were unlocked. We need better policies and procedures around this. And a few months after we did this, we actually got several more security cameras put in around the office, which we considered a pretty big win for us. So you can affect real change by this, and this cost us almost nothing. I think my overall budget for that red team was like $1,000 for that year, and 600 of that went to making coins for the team. So like, I mean, we spent a few $100s, and we really improved the way security was done around the office. So we're kind of closing in on the end here. It's not a super long talk, but it bears repeating. You really want to start small and basic. You want to grow as the organization grows, and do it in small enough steps that the org can keep up with you. You want to show value at every step of the way so that they remain interested and keep thinking that this is a good thing for them. and you really want to have fun while you're doing it and display that fun and passion so that it's, it affects other people and gets them excited about it. And as the graphic says, if not you, then who, right? If you're in a small organization, if you're hurting for resources, one of the best ways that you can increase your headcount is by getting non-security people involved in security. They're not just a lot of people like to say, oh, well, users are the second perimeter, right? Users are your second attack surface. But perimeters aren't just defensive. They're not just attack vectors. They're also your sentry posts. They're your sensor networks. They're people that report the stuff that they're your front lines. They're reporting stuff as they see it. So if you can get them involved, um, your security posture can go way up, and you can have a little bit of extra resources to do this fun stuff. So I want to thank everybody for joining this webcast. I have several links on the screen right now. All of the slides for all the talks that I do are on my GitHub account. As Jason mentioned earlier, I do some live streaming of hacking challenges at YouTube, and then you can follow me on Twitter and my blog. So I believe now we're going to open it up to questions.
Absolutely. I got questions coming in, so if you have questions, feel free to start shooting them into me in the questions window. Derek, first question, what are good places for reference you would recommend when starting up programs such as Lockpick Village?
So the Lockpick Village specifically is pretty easy. Tool, Tool, is an organization of lockpickers that has just a ridiculous amount of resources for stuff like that. They have slides to help introduce people to the concepts of lockpicking, how lockpicking works and why. They have all kinds of printing material and success stories of various lockpick villages and stuff like that. And then really, what I would suggest if you haven't done this before at all is think about yourself as a lockpicker. If you're not a lockpicker, learn to lockpick. Buy a cheap set, buy a cheap lock, and kind of go through it. And then as you go through that process, think about the things that worked for you, the examples that helped you, and then just scale that up. I want to host 10 people lockpicking at a time. What resources do I need for that? What materials do I need for that? And then Amazon. I wouldn't recommend Amazon if you really want to get into lockpicking as a hobby, but they have some really cheap lockpick set combos with like really cheap picks and a cheap plastic lock. And that's really all you need to start, and then once it kind of gains popularity, you can, expand from there.
I'm looking at my Lockpick set over on the shelf right now.
I actually went overboard. Once I got into lockpicking, I think I have like I start collecting lockpick sets now because I'm like, oh, that looks neat.
Yeah. From Eva, how do you convince an organization that doesn't really seem interested in anything you find or have any process in place to resolve the issues found? How do you find the right person to talk to?
So that's difficult, especially in smaller organizations where they don't have any security. I've worked in organizations where, I, as one of 3 IT people, was also the security person. And not because anybody mandated that I should do security, but because I liked security and thought it was important. So this is where, and I don't want to say that there are organizations that are just beyond help and will never listen, but some organizations are certainly more resistant to those lessons than others. What's important, I think, is to learn the language of the business and understand what they value and what they consider success and failure. And if you can pitch what you're trying to convey in their language, I think you'll be a lot more successful, right? So just saying, oh, there's these 8 vulnerabilities that can result in RCE, we should do something about this. That doesn't really mean anything to them. But if you can demonstrate that their payroll or their credit card processing server has a denial of service bug in it, and it could be down for hours or days before we have a chance to fix it, and that will result in X amount of revenue loss, that's a much different story to the business. And as you build that rapport and as you get the smaller wins, it's kind of the same way as growing the engagements you want. Start with something that's easy for them to understand, but maybe even not the most important on your agenda, but something that's easier to explain to them. And as you build that rapport, as you get them to follow you on this journey, it'll get easier and easier to bring to them the bigger security risks that are maybe a little more abstract, harder for them to understand.
Derek, I keep picturing like you and your own personal red team at work, and like you have shirts and a special handshake, and I can only imagine there's going to be at least 10% of the people who are currently listening or will listen to the archive that goes, I want my own personal red team. So
yeah,
cool.
Yeah, they should. And you know what? One of the best things I did was get coins made. And if they're not coins, then they're shirts or whatever you can do. I liked coins because they can keep them at their desk. And I actually bought them I gave them 2 coins, one to carry around and 1 coin holder. And so they could have their coins sitting at their desk. And people were like, oh, that's so cool. How did you get that? And then it kind of creates this marketing for you. But that sense of membership was huge. And it got people really into the idea of it.
Yeah. I have more questions, so here we go. Do you have any thoughts on trading engagements with other organizations, such as you hack us, we'll hack you?
As far as across companies, like different companies, that would be awesome. I have thought of that. I think that anybody that has hacker friends at other related companies has probably had that idea at least a couple times. It's difficult because of like legal stuff, and of course, businesses are very guarded about their intellectual property and everything. So it's kind of hard to work that out. If you can, that would be rad. Personally, I think that would just be fun, and it would be good for both parties because you can see how other people do stuff. If you're a big enough organization to just have like multiple security teams, then hosting CTFs or if you can do like red team versus red team engagements, if you're that big, I think would be a lot of fun too. But hosting CTFs is actually a great way to get people who are, ready to take that plunge into security, but haven't quite yet. It's a good way to bridge that gap and get people really excited about stuff.
So this is a quick plug for NetWars, but it's along those lines. We've had large organizations before where they took level 5 of NetWars and they had their security teams each get their own castle, and they were attacking each other's castle just to have that camaraderie and competitive spirit to see who could hack who the best.
Oh yeah, and level 5 is if you haven't done level 5 NetWars, it's harder in like the live NetWars because of the time box that I keep talking about. But just to plug NetWars Continuous a little bit, you get a lot more time. You get like 3 months, I think, of time, and you can, with some dedication, especially if you're working in a team, you can definitely get to level 5 and have some competitive spirit there.
I got a couple more questions.
Yep.
What if I'm in a big organization, but the team is small and I can't get real support from management to actually exploit things?
So that's hard. The golden rule is definitely don't exploit unless you have permission. Because if you don't have permission, what we do is absolutely illegal. And even if you work there, you can get fired. So that's difficult. What I would say, what I have had success with in the past is saying, okay, well, I can't exploit that because it's important. But what if I set up something similar on a local VM and I exploit it? Can I present my results to you? Can I get some time on your calendar to present my results? And typically, it's just a matter of breaking down that initial wall of them not thinking it's important or not caring. And if you can make it as easy for them, as low effort for them to participate and break down that wall, then you can move on to the bigger stuff and more important stuff, I think, is how I've done it in the past. Set up a small lab, get something on your own hardware and demonstrate that way.
Here we go. You have focused mainly on the IT domain. Would you change your message for the OT workers?
That's a great question. So my background is IT. To be completely honest, I haven't thought about OT a lot from that perspective. Uh, I think the specifics of my message would change. Like the specific how to do things and what specific activities to do. But the broader message, the more fundamental message of start small, build the rapport, get people excited, stays the same. I think that the more involved your surrounding community and your colleagues are in what you do from a security perspective, the easier your job's going to be, no matter what domain you're in.
Derek, a quick question for any advice to someone who's actively working on getting the OSCP and the challenges it brings? I know this is the SANS webcast, but I'm a fan of the OSCP and I believe you have it. So what tips do you have?
Yeah. I do have the OSCP, and I think the tips that I have are similar to what I would give in for like the GXPN as well. Is just what Tara Wheeler I think said it best recently is the motto of try harder isn't necessarily um, what you should be paying attention to. The advice of just don't give up. Uh, the There is such a huge community of people of all different skill levels that are striving towards these goals, and it's easy to get caught up in the fact that you see people like me that go into a webcast or a live stream and I just do something and it's like, oh man, it just worked. But the years of struggle, my OSCP, it took me uh, almost 9 months. I think I did 3 months and then I did a 2 month before I took the test. So everyone struggles. It's difficult for everyone, and just keep going and seek out advice. The community is amazing. Twitter, my technical acumen and career has just skyrocketed when I got on Twitter and really started engaging with the community more. There's so many helpful people out there, and just sometimes it's okay to lean on people and ask for help, but ask for good help. Don't just ask them to solve it for you.
Thank you, Derek. Hey, what are red team, what are the first steps to learning red team skills?
15 years of sysadmin really helped. I think that there's no such thing as learning red team in a vacuum. Any sort of offensive stuff, the reason that I took to it so well is because I had so much engineering and administration background that I knew how everything worked. And John Strand compares what we do to architecture a lot, because it's all about understanding the failure points and the failure conditions of things. And if you know how they're put together and how they operate, then it's very easy to deduce where the failure modes and failure points are and things. So really, you can learn how to use Metasploit all you want, but it'll be much better to know be a Windows admin and know PowerShell from like an administrator perspective for a while, or be a Linux administrator and know bash scripting and Python and Puppet and Chef and all of these things that administrators use. Because the first time you drop Meterpreter onto a Windows box, every IDS and host host protection are going to light up like a Christmas tree. But if you use PowerShell to pivot into that box and do like normal admin stuff, you're golden. So know how the blue team operates, and that's the best way to learn red team, I think.
I also really hope people watch your live streams on YouTube.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
that's a good way too, I
guess. Here's a really great question, and this reminds me of when social engineers do what social engineers do, and people feel hurt by those tactics. So here comes the question: any tips on getting IT buy-in, when often whatever you find can kind of muddy your relationship with IT?
It's funny you mentioned social engineering, because you have to use a little bit of that when you approach this. And so one thing I'd like to clarify is that social engineering is not always aggressive or offensive. Social engineering is something we do every day when we negotiate salary or, meet a new person that we want to be our friend or anything like that. And so from that perspective, you have to come at it with a genuine, and this is important because if you're just being fake, it's not going to work, but you have to come to them with a genuine interest in making things better for them. We do what we do because we want to make things safer and more secure. We don't, and this is important for people because I don't know that everyone views it like this, but we don't get into red team and hacking just to walk in, drop some ODAs and walk out giggling because their defenses are bad. We do what we do to demonstrate weak points and potential impact so that things can get better. And if we come to IT with that perspective, if we explain to them, like, look, we're not here to call your baby ugly. We're here to make sure that the crib is safe. We're here to make sure your doors are locked and your windows are closed. We're here to make your jobs easier and better. Because frankly, these are all software bugs. Maybe an attacker can trigger them on purpose, but sometimes they just get triggered through normal operation and then stuff crashes and they get called in on the weekends. A safer environment is a better environment and a more robust and resilient environment. So you're really helping them in the end, and you have to again figure out what their language of success and what the language of the business is to connect with them.
Derek, I've never actually had this many questions during a webcast before. You're doing fantastic. Thank you.
Oh, thanks.
Is there a tool you depend on as a collaboration platform for sharing engagement information in a red teaming or pen test assessment?
That's a great question. So I started at my company about almost a year ago, and we're just at the point where I'm actually hiring the team. And so I put this question out on Twitter like maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it blew up. I got a billion answers. I mean, there's a lot of tools out there. I haven't had a chance to experiment with them all and find one that I liked yet. The difficulty that I'm having is finding something that doesn't change my workflow very much or doesn't kind of interrupt my process. And so a lot of the responses that I got were, just have some sort of cloud service. A lot of people said OneNote or something similar. But having some sort of like shared server, we're thinking about just putting up a separate GitHub that's not part of the code repository, but just one server that we kind of own and manipulate. That's one option, but honestly, I'm open to it. Tweet if you have one that works really well for you and really like it. I think my original question was just about reporting tools, but collaboration tools, all that stuff. If you have one that really works for you, please tweet at me because this is something I'm going through right now.
That sounds like a webcast that we should do soon.
I agree. Please do. I would love to watch that.
Yeah. We're looking at doing a reporting webcast too, but we're not sure how many people would tune in. If you would tune into a webcast and reports, just please let me know in the chat or the questions.
Oh, yeah. I would definitely. So you got one at least.
Wow. A lot of you. That's awesome. If the company isn't willing to dedicate any time to allowing people to attend events, such as Lockpick Village, any suggestions for gaining traction?
Lunch. If they're not willing to do that, it depends on how big your organization is, and maybe you have to start with just a team or two, kind of cap it at a certain attendance level. If you have to spend the $30 to order pizza for everybody, do it. Otherwise, usually you can get like $30, $40 to kind of do a lunch and learn. But if you cap it as a lunch and learn, if you pitch it as a lunch and learn, you could do that. When I first started the amateur red team at my last company, because they all had jobs, right? I could call that my white space. So I had 10% of my time that I could devote to that, but they didn't necessarily. So we were meeting, for a half hour, the first half hour of lunch, or we would meet, half an hour, like at 5 o'clock where everybody's still actually working, but technically we could leave the office. So we would do stuff like that. But again, and I know that not everybody is in the financial place where they can, spare $40. So I get it. definitely push your boss or your company to try and put that. But if you can do it the first time and demonstrate impact, it'll get easier to get some time during work to do that as well. And then, look at it as like a one-time opportunity cost.
Derek, I feel, I'm just gathering a feeling that a lot of the people on here are looking at doing this or are interested, and they're seeing you as like the success story that it is possible. So thank you for being that use case that people can turn to.
I'm glad. And I said this earlier, it really started as a, man, I really want to do red team, but I can't do red team. How do I do it? And it was one of those things of, if not me, then who would? Do I have to leave companies? Do I have to sign on to a red team as a junior person? I was already a senior security engineer, so transitioning to a junior would hurt, for like my family's lifestyle and whatnot. So it's really just finding the ways you can in your own company. And please do, and share your success stories with me, because the more, and this is why I have a YouTube channel, the more we grow as a community and the more we share with each other how things work and how we succeed, the better off we are. Because I only have a limited amount of experience and you only have a limited amount of experience, but together we have 75% more experience, or maybe even double. So
a few last questions. Do you have metrics or measures that can be used to track success of either penetration testing or red teaming assessments?
So kind of, we're starting to build them at my current place. So what I like to use are repeat findings over time. We found this in this application, and then we found 3 of the same findings the next one, but they closed 6 of them. And what I like to show is that dropping, right? And the cool thing about this is it's actually a metric for your education programs than it is pen testing specifically, because as pen testers, we want repeat findings to go down. We don't, and I'm actually hopefully we'll have enough statistics and metrics that I can give this talk at maybe Hackfest, but I want to give a talk of how to never exploit MSO 8067 again. And the way you do that is through user education and developer education and tracking those repeat findings over time. That's my favorite one. Another one is just, especially if you're trying to pitch an internal team as opposed to just going external, is you can pitch like, okay, this is how much it costs us to do an internal engagement, and this is how much it costs to do an external engagement, and then track that over time of like, we saved X amount of money, with the 3 people doing this, part-time versus, having external people do it every time. And then you can use that money towards education. That's actually how I justify a lot of my team's SANS courses, is say, look, we cut that engagement by half, give us, half of the money we saved, and send us to classes that help us do this job better.
Oh man, I gotta take that section and use it for something in the future. Thank you.
Yeah.
So last question will be, unless a few more pop in, when you had your own personal red team, at your last organization, and you put this ragtag team of red teamers together, what kind of training did you give them to do that engagement?
And the reason that we specifically picked a physical engagement is because it didn't take a lot of high-end training. It didn't take a lot of technical training. We would, during our meetings, like I said, we met every other week, and I would usually prepare like a 15-minute intro to X talk, not even a talk, but just kind of a discussion of like, here's how buffer overflows work, or this is why cross-site scripting is so insidious, or this is how you do SQL injection, and stuff like that, to kind of give them an overall like feeling like they're getting more into offensive work. But at the end of the day, you have to kind of judge what you have talent for, right? And so we had planned more engagements that we didn't necessarily have time to do, but other good ones are, and along the physical lines, are like social engineering engagements. We were going to send our lawyer, who was one of the fastest talkers I've ever seen in my life. We were going to send our lawyer to try and get into our data center without any credentials. And that was, we had it all planned out how it would happen, but it was all social engineering. And so we took what he already knew intuitively as a lawyer and just kind of gave him a little bit extra from like actual social engineering tactics and from the social engineering framework and stuff like that. So you don't have to get crazy, right? It's just the same stuff that you would do in a security awareness to get effective red team stuff going on. And they also make great tabletop exercises for incident response. Again, doesn't take a lot of technical training, but you can train them in offensive mindset, and they can be red teamers for IR tabletop stuff.
It looks like a lot of people are still hanging in here, so we have a few more questions. This one's from Chris. Besides the OSCP, I know CompTIA is beta testing a new pen testing cert, and ISACA has a new CSX school for pen testing. Do you see these new certifications as good or bad for the field?
Oh man, I have like a two-part blog, and when I don't blog often because I'm very verbose. I have yet to learn the ways of brevity in blog posting, but I have a two-part blog about my history with certs. So I used to be one of the ones that just hated certs and thought they were terrible for the industry and all that stuff. And then, not to drink the Kool-Aid here, but SANS is the one that turned me around on that, the first SANS class I took. And now it depends on the certification. It depends on the certification body, and it depends on the people that design it and how much effort really goes into it. There's the eLearn security group. I don't have any other certs, but I've heard from various people that they're pretty good. Clearly, the SANS GX stuff is very good. Offensive security has a set of amazing certs. The way I look at certs is this: the training that belongs to them is the important part for the industry. It's the training, it's the education, and the quality of that education that actually impacts the industry. Certs are a little bonus thing that I think helps demonstrate for either for if you're a consultant that bills out your time and you want to demonstrate, like, look at all this stuff that qualifies me to bill my time at whatever I'm billing at. Or if you're trying to break into a new field, you can say, look, I don't have a lot of experience, but these certifications verify that I've gone through this training and I have this skill set. And it helps, I think speakers and instructors and stuff kind of, add credentials to their names. But it's really, and this is why SANS turned me around on this concept, it's really the education that goes along with them. So if we're getting more avenues for education at more various price points and more varied skill sets and different perspectives on those skill sets, I think the more education that's out there, the better. I think the more ways for our community to learn, the better. So unfortunately, I don't have any specific experience with those bodies, so I can't speak to them too much.
And Derek, our last question for today. It's similar to a previous question, but let's ask it one last time, because I think you'll have more perspective on it. And I also wanted to mention, a lot of people have talked about red teaming. This isn't just a plug for the SANS 2-day red teaming course, but it's a very good course if you're getting into red teaming or you want to measure red teams. It is SANS Security 564. It's a 2-day course on red teaming. So here comes the question. If I was starting a red team at my org, deliverables and performance is important. How can you measure performance, and what would a deliverable look like?
Deliverables are important. That was kind of a long question. Can you repeat it just so I make sure I have the whole thing?
Yeah. So if you're starting a red team and deliverables and performance is important, how can you measure performance, and what would a deliverable look like?
Interesting. So the scope and mission of a red team is fuzzy in our industry, and frankly, we could probably ask every single person on this stream and what red teaming actually is and what their purpose is, and we'd probably get almost that number of definitions. So what I would say and I hope this isn't too much of a cop-out, but I'm going to take a step back a little bit. What I would say is, and I went through this as I started building my team, is I went to not only my leadership, but also the surrounding leadership, like the people that my teams interact with the most, and gather, what are you looking like? What, from your perspective, what is this team? What is their purpose? What are they doing? And what are you expecting to get out of it? And then once I had that criteria, I kind of built my own, I built my own mission statement and my own roadmap of the things that I wanted to accomplish that, hit most of those. Sometimes somebody said, well, this is what I'm expecting you guys to build firewalls all day. And it's like, oh, okay, well, maybe we need to work together to kind of help each other understand more precisely what this team is for. But, build a roadmap to try and hit as many of those as I could that I thought were reasonable. And then in that roadmap, just very deliberately spec out and say, okay, these are kind of my goals to start with. And so for me personally, it was, I need to build a roadmap. I want to build out certain types of capabilities, from, pen testing and vulnerability assessments to actual red team and incident response preparedness evaluation is kind of what I consider red teaming to be. And then, either even like kind of North Star, like multi-year roadmap stuff of like, man, I'd really love to have an internal APT. That'd be fun. But then you have to work with the surrounding team members again to kind of say, okay, these are the things that I'm expecting to do. These are the metrics that I expect to judge myself against. So when I first start out, it's like, okay, I got my first employee. We're going to do, one or two internal engagements. And the first one is you just got to do a baseline. And the way we measured that is against the report of like, was this report helpful? Were you able to follow along with the remediation steps? Were you able to follow along with reproduction steps? Did you agree with the severity ratings, et cetera? Because there's really nothing to be like, okay, we improved, we did better than it, or whatever. And the trap that you don't want to fall into, and I kept getting pushed to try and add this metric to my kind of dashboard stuff. You do not want to commit to number of findings as a metric, because frankly, in a perfect world, we don't find anything, right? Like that's the best case scenario for the business, is that everything's 100% secure. And I'm not saying that I've ever seen something like that, but you don't want to have your metric of like, oh, I want this findings to increase over time as our capabilities expand, because that's not, you can't ever really commit to that. What you want to commit to is value to the customer. In this case, the customer is an internal team. Value to the customer, and reduction in remediation time is a good one to kind of go against. Is like how, over time, how much faster are they remediating stuff than before? My AppSec guy that one of my peers likes to say, he move security to the left, right? Like get that earlier in the dev cycle. So if your team can help move that earlier in the dev cycle and reduce cost of bug fixes, that's a really good metric, I think.
Derek, we are running out of time. Thank you for the hour of answering a series of questions from all the gamuts. You did a fantastic job. If you enjoyed this webcast, please let us know by either saying something in the comments or the questions window. Derek is a prospective and hopefully future SANS instructor for us. And your comments, we at SANS love evals. So just hearing back from you would be great. And you should definitely follow him on Twitter and watch his live streams. Derek, do you have any final thoughts for us today?
No, I think we just about covered everything. Is this gonna go on YouTube?
Absolutely. This will be recorded, and the words we are saying right now will be heard from people for a long, long time.
Outstanding. That makes me happy.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, Carol, it is back to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Derek, and thank you, Jason, for moderating. That was a great presentation, and we appreciate that it helps bring this content to the SANS community. To our audience, we greatly appreciate you listening in. For a schedule of all upcoming and archived SANS webcasts, including this one, please visit sans.org/webcasts. Until next time, take care, and we hope to have you back again for the next SANS webcast.